The night Whitney Houston stopped performing didn't begin with a scandal, a scream, or a dramatic walk-off. It began quietly, in the space between applause and silence. The kind of silence most people never notice, but artists feel in their bones. From the outside, everything looked perfect. The lights were warm, the audience was ready, the band tuned and waiting. But inside Whitney, something had shifted. For the first time in her career, the weight she felt wasn't fear of failure. It was the exhaustion of pretending. Pretending she was untouched. Pretending she was fine. Pretending that singing the truth was the same as living it. That night, Whitney realized something dangerous and freeing at the same time. Her voice had been carrying everyone else's emotions for years, while her own were trapped behind expectations, contracts, and carefully managed smiles. The world didn't want honesty. It wanted consistency, reliability, the version of Whitney that never asked for anything in return. But standing there, just seconds before stepping back into the spotlight, she understood that continuing to perform without telling the truth would cost her more than walking away ever could. What followed wasn't a rebellion the world could easily label. It was quieter, deeper, and far more unsettling for the people who needed her to stay exactly as she was. This story isn't about a concert gone wrong. It's about a moment of awakening, the night Whitney Houston chose to stop being a performance and start being a person. A decision that would ripple through her life, her relationships, and her legacy in ways no one expected. If this story moves you, challenges you, or makes you see Whitney Houston and fame itself in a new light, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. I remember the exact second I realized I didn't want to walk on stage anymore. Not because I was afraid. Not because my voice wasn't ready. But because I was tired of pretending that the person the audience loved was the same woman standing backstage, staring at her own hands and wondering when she had stopped belonging to herself. The arena was already alive. I could feel it through the walls, the low roar of thousands of voices blending into one restless sound. My name floated through it, carried by excitement and expectation. Whitney, Whitney, Whitney. I had heard that chant more times than I could count, and most nights it filled me with energy. That night it felt heavy, like a demand. Backstage lights hummed softly above me. The smell of warm cables, makeup, and metal filled the air. People moved with purpose around me. Assistants, technicians, dancers, all of them focused on the machine of the show. Everyone knew their role. Everyone except me. I sat in front of the mirror, already dressed, already styled, already prepared to become what the world expected. The woman staring back at me looked flawless. Hair perfect, makeup untouched, strong. But I knew the truth. Behind that reflection was a version of me that had been quiet for too long. A version that had swallowed disappointment, confusion, loneliness. All for the sake of being professional. For the sake of not ruining the moment for anyone else. I had learned early that people loved my voice, but they loved my silence even more. A stage manager knocked lightly on the door. 5 minutes, Whitney. 5 minutes. That's all it takes to change a life if you're honest enough. I nodded and smiled automatically the way I always did. As soon as the door closed, the smile faded. My chest felt tight, not with nerves, but with something closer to grief. Grief for all the nights I had sung about love and freedom while feeling trapped inside my own success. I stood up and walked slowly toward the hallway that led to the stage. Every step echoed. Each one brought back memories. First standing ovations, first record deals, first times people told me, don't say that. Don't do that. Just sing. Singing had become my shield. If I sang well enough, no one asked questions. If I delivered the performance, no one cared what it cost me. At the edge of the stage I stopped. The curtain was still closed, but I could feel the heat of the lights waiting on the other side. I could imagine the crowd rising to their feet the moment I appeared. I could already hear the applause that would drown out everything else, including me. That's when the thought hit me, sharp and undeniable. If I walk out there like this, I will disappear again. Closed my eyes. I thought about the girl I used to be, singing in church, singing because it felt good, because it felt true. No cameras, No contracts. No fear of saying the wrong thing. That girl hadn't known fame, but she had known herself. Somewhere along the way, I had learned to perform strength instead of living it. Someone touched my arm gently. My manager leaned in, voice low. "You okay?" I looked at him and saw concern mixed with calculation. He needed the show to go on. Everyone did. Thousands of people had bought tickets. Networks were watching. Schedules were locked. I opened my mouth to say the usual words. "I'm fine. Let's go." But they didn't come out. "I can't do it the same way tonight," I said instead. His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I can't just sing and pretend nothing's wrong." The silence between us felt louder than the crowd outside. "Whitney," he said carefully, "this isn't the time for surprises." I turned back toward the curtain, heart pounding. This was the moment where I usually backed down. The moment where I chose comfort over truth. But something inside me refused to move. "I'm not performing tonight," I said quietly. "Not like this." Behind the curtain, the band started playing the intro. And for the first time in my career, I didn't step forward. The music kept playing even though I didn't move. That's the thing about performances. They don't stop just because the person at the center of them hesitates. The band followed the script. The lights warmed. The crowd cheered louder, assuming the delay was theatrical. A dramatic pause. They had no idea that behind the curtain, everything was unraveling. My manager's hand tightened on my arm. "Whitney," he whispered sharply, "this isn't funny." I pulled away, not aggressively, just enough to reclaim my space. "I'm not joking." His eyes flicked toward the stage entrance, then back to me. "You're already dressed. The crowd is ready. Whatever you're feeling, we can talk about it later." Later. That word had followed me my entire career. Later meant never. Later meant swallow it. Later meant survive another night. "I can't," I said. My voice surprised me with its steadiness. "If I walk out there right now, I'll be lying." He stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "You're an artist. You sing emotions. That's what you do." "No," I said quietly. "I live them. Or at least I'm supposed to." Behind us, someone hissed. "Where is she?" Another voice said, "Stretch the intro." The machine was adapting, trying to cover the crack forming at its center. I stepped back into the dressing room and closed the door before anyone could stop me. The mirror greeted me again. The same flawless face, the same controlled image. I leaned forward, hands gripping the counter, and finally let myself breathe. My chest rose and fell too fast. Not panic. Not fear. Relief. The kind that comes when you stop running from yourself. A knock hit the door harder this time. "Whitney, open up," my manager said. "You're putting everyone in an impossible position." I opened the door slowly. "I've been in that position for years." He softened his tone. "Just go out there. Sing the first song. Then we'll adjust. You don't have to say anything." That's when it became clear. They didn't want my voice tonight. They wanted my compliance. I shook my head. "If I go out there, I'm going to speak." His face drained of color. "Absolutely not." "I'm not asking," I said. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Outside, the crowd began to murmur. Confusion rippled through the noise. Something was wrong and they could feel it. Finally, he exhaled sharply. "You do this, and you don't control what happens next." I met his gaze. "I haven't controlled anything in a long time." I walked past him toward the stage entrance. Every step felt unreal, like I was walking through water. The curtain began to part. The lights hit my eyes hard, blinding for a second. The sound, the applause, surged like a wave crashing straight into my chest. I stepped into it anyway. The crowd exploded. Thousands of faces blurred together, all expecting the same thing they'd always gotten. I stood at the microphone, hands resting lightly on it, listening as the applause rose and fell. The band waited for my cue. I didn't give it. Instead, I leaned closer to the mic. "I know you came here to hear me sing," I said, my voice steady but quiet. The room hushed instantly. And I promise you, I will. A ripple of relieved laughter moved through the crowd. But not before I tell you the truth. Somewhere off stage I felt movement. Panic. People realizing this wasn't planned. I've spent most of my life giving pieces of myself away, I continued. And tonight, I realized I don't have any left if I keep pretending I'm okay when I'm not. The room went completely silent. I could feel the risk in every word. Feel contracts tearing invisibly. Feel careers recalculating my value in real time. But I also felt something else. Myself standing fully present for the first time in years. This isn't easy for me, I said. And it might not be easy for you to hear. But if my voice has ever meant anything, then it deserves honesty too. From the corner of my eye, I saw my manager pacing. Someone else had a phone to their ear. The system was already reacting. Took a breath. And then, just as I was about to say the one thing I had never said out loud on any stage, the lights cut out. The microphone went dead. And the arena plunged into darkness. For a split second, the darkness felt absolute, like the world had taken a sharp inhale and forgotten how to breathe. Then the crowd reacted. A wave of confusion rolled through the arena. Voices rose, chairs scraped, someone laughed nervously, assuming it was part of the show. Emergency lights flickered faintly along the walls, casting long, uneasy shadows across thousands of faces that could no longer see me but could still feel that something had gone wrong. I stood frozen at the microphone stand, my hands still wrapped around cold metal that no longer carried my voice. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, louder than the murmurs spreading through the crowd. This wasn't theatrical. This wasn't planned. I turned slightly, looking toward the wings of the stage. Shapes moved quickly. Silhouettes of crew members rushing, heads bent together, hands gesturing sharply. I saw my manager's outline, rigid and unmistakable even in the half-light. He wasn't surprised. That's when the truth landed in my chest with terrifying clarity. This wasn't about protecting me. This was about stopping me. A backup generator kicked in, restoring dim lighting but no sound. The band sat frozen, instruments useless without power. The audience waited, restless now, sensing tension instead of anticipation. I stepped forward anyway. Without the microphone, without amplification, without permission. "I'm still here," I called out, my voice raw but strong. It didn't reach the far corners, but it reached the first rows. Faces leaned forward. People quieted each other. Kept going. "They can turn off the lights," I said, projecting from somewhere deeper than technique. "But they can't turn me off." Gasps rippled outward. Off stage, someone shouted my name, sharp, angry. I ignored it. "I didn't come here tonight to perform perfection," I said. "I came here because I couldn't keep lying to myself anymore." Security began moving closer to the stage. I could see them now, purposeful, tense. Not aggressive yet, but ready. "My voice has been used to make people feel safe," I continued. While I wasn't. The words came faster now, fueled by adrenaline and a lifetime of restraint breaking open. "I've been told what to sing, when to smile, when to stay quiet. I was praised for being strong as long as that strength didn't inconvenience anyone." Someone in the crowd shouted, "We love you, Whitney." That did it. Emotion surged up my throat, hot and sudden. I pressed my hand to my chest, grounding myself before it could steal my breath. "I love you too," I said. "That's why I can't pretend tonight." Security reached the edge of the stage. A crew member tried to pull me back by the arm. I shook him off, not violently, but decisively. "No," I said. "I'm not done." The crowd began to clap, not the roaring applause of performance, but something slower, heavier, supportive, defiant. I realized then that this moment didn't belong to the people trying to contain it anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever felt managed, muted, or made smaller for the sake of convenience. I took a breath and said the thing I had been avoiding for years. "I've been afraid to tell the truth because I was told it would cost me everything." Silence fell again, complete, reverent. But tonight, I said, my voice shaking now. I realized it already did. Hand grabbed my arm harder this time. I turned and saw my manager's face clearly under the emergency lights. Pale, furious, afraid. "This is over," he hissed. "You're done." I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt something unexpected. "Pity. For you," I said quietly. Security began escorting me toward the side of the stage. The crowd erupted. Boos mixed with cheers, confusion colliding with loyalty. People stood. Phones lifted. Voices shouted my name like they were trying to hold on to me. As I was pulled into the wings, I caught one last glimpse of the audience. Thousands of people who hadn't come for the truth, but stayed when it arrived. Backstage was chaos. Voices overlapped. Someone yelled about contracts. Someone else demanded damage control. The power suddenly returned, lights blazing, sound roaring back to life. Too late. I stood there, breathing hard, hands trembling. My manager stepped in front of me. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" "Yes," I said. "I told the truth." His jaw tightened. "You've crossed a line you can't uncross." Before I could respond, a woman I barely recognized approached us. Headset, badge, eyes sharp. "There's a problem," she said quietly. "The feed was live longer than we thought." My manager turned to her slowly. "What do you mean?" She swallowed. "Millions heard her. And it's already spreading." The room went silent. I felt a strange calm settle over me. Because for the first time, the truth wasn't just spoken. It was unstoppable. The hallway outside the dressing rooms felt narrower than it ever had before, like the building itself was closing in on me. Voices echoed from every direction. Frantic, urgent, controlled panic trying to sound professional. Phones rang non-stop. Words like legal, containment, statement floated through the air as if they could undo what had already happened. I sat alone on a metal folding chair, still in my stage dress, the glitter catching the harsh fluorescent lights in a way that suddenly felt obscene. This outfit had been designed to make me shine. Now it felt like armor I didn't need anymore. A production assistant handed me a bottle of water. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. "You okay?" she whispered, eyes darting around like she was afraid to be seen caring. He nodded. Not because I was okay, but because explaining would take more strength than I had. Down the hall, my manager argued with someone on the phone. His voice was low but sharp, each word carefully chosen, like he was already shaping the story the world would hear. She went off script. "No, this wasn't approved. We're assessing the situation." Assessing the situation. As if the truth were a technical malfunction. I stood up before my legs could change their mind and walked toward the door at the end of the hallway, the one that led outside, away from stages and scripts and handlers. A security guard stepped in front of me instinctively. "She needs space," I said calmly. He hesitated, then stepped aside. Cold night air hit my face like a baptism. The roar of the crowd still leaked through the walls behind me, restless and alive. Somewhere beyond the parking lot, cameras waited. Reporters were already gathering. I could feel it, the way animals sense a storm before the clouds arrive. I wrapped my arms around myself and breathed. 4 years, silence had been my survival strategy. Think. Deliver excellence. Let people decide who I was because it was easier than fighting them. But silence had a cost. And tonight I had finally paid it in full. A memory surfaced. Not of a stage, but of a quiet room decades ago. I was young, sitting on a church pew, listening to my own voice echo back to me for the first time. Back then, singing wasn't a product. It was prayer. It was honesty. It was me. Somewhere along the way that got lost. A door opened behind me. I didn't turn. "You've created a serious problem," my manager said. His voice calmer now. "More dangerous because of it. This will follow you." "I know," I replied. "You don't understand how this works," he continued. "People don't want truth. They want consistency. They want the version of you they paid for." I finally faced him. "They don't own me," I said quietly. His eyes hardened. "Contracts say otherwise." I almost laughed. Not out of humor, out of exhaustion. Contracts can't make me lie anymore, I said. He stepped closer. If you keep this up, doors will close. I met his gaze. Some doors should. He stared at me for a long moment, searching for hesitation, fear, regret. He didn't find it. Without another word, he turned and walked away. I stayed outside long after the noise inside shifted from chaos to strategy. I watched my breath fog the air and wondered what tomorrow would look like. By the time I returned to my dressing room, my phone was buzzing non-stop. Messages stacked on messages. Some from people I hadn't heard from in years. Some from people who had never dared speak honestly to me before. Heard you. Thank you. You said what we couldn't. There were threats too. Warnings. Thinly veiled concern. I ignored them. Instead, I sat in front of the mirror and wiped the makeup from my face, slowly, deliberately. With every swipe, a layer of performance disappeared. What stared back at me wasn't polished, but she was real. Later that night, alone in my hotel room, I turned on the television. Every channel showed clips from the blackout, my voice echoing without microphones, grainy footage of me being led off stage. The headlines were already forming. Whitney Houston breaks down on stage. Industry shocked by unscripted speech. Trouble behind the scenes. They were still trying to control the narrative. I switched it off. Lying in the dark, I felt something unfamiliar settle into my bones. Not the kind that comes from approval, but the kind that comes from alignment. Tomorrow the consequences would arrive. Backlash. A spin. The silence from people who once called daily. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't performing. I was telling the truth. And no matter what it cost me next, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was finally free. Morning arrived without ceremony. No dramatic sunrise, no music swelling in the background, just pale light slipping through the hotel curtains and the quiet hum of traffic below. I lay awake long before my alarm, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of what I had done settle into my chest. Truth doesn't explode all at once. Seeps. My phone rested on the nightstand like a living thing. I hadn't touched it since the night before, but I could feel it buzzing with consequences. When I finally reached for it, the screen lit up with hundreds of notifications. Missed calls, messages, alerts. My name was everywhere. I scrolled slowly. Some messages were careful, professional, already distancing themselves. We'll regroup. Let's talk after things cool down. PR will handle it. Others were cruel in their honesty. You embarrassed yourself. You ruined everything. Why now? But woven between them were messages that stopped my breath. I felt less alone hearing you. My daughter watched that moment and cried. You gave me permission to speak my own truth. Those were the ones that stayed. I showered, letting the water run hotter than usual, hoping it could wash away the noise. Didn't. But it steadied me. When I stepped out wrapped in a towel, I caught my reflection again. Barefaced, tired, unprotected. Still real. By mid-morning the knock came. 2 sharp taps. Controlled. Official. I opened the door to find my manager and a lawyer I'd met only once before. They entered without waiting for an invitation, settling into the room like they owned the air itself. This is serious, the lawyer began, sliding papers onto the table. You violated performance agreements. Sponsors are asking questions. There may be financial repercussions. I listened quietly. My manager leaned forward. If you issue a clarification, not an apology, just a clarification, we can stabilize this. A clarification of what? Yes. That you were emotional, exhausted, misunderstood, he replied. That you didn't mean what it sounded like. I shook my head slowly. I meant every word. Silence filled the room, thick and uncomfortable. You're burning bridges, he said finally. No, I replied. I'm stopping myself from drowning. The lawyer exhaled through his nose. Then you need to be prepared for fallout. I am. They left shortly after, disappointed but unsurprised. They'd seen artists resist before, Usually briefly, usually unsuccessfully. What they didn't understand was that something fundamental had shifted inside me. I wasn't rebelling. I was done pretending. That afternoon I went for a walk alone. No security, no assistance. Just a coat, sunglasses, and the city. People recognized me anyway, they always did, but something about their expressions had changed. They didn't look at me like a myth. They looked at me like a human being. One woman approached hesitantly. She didn't ask for a photo. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, voice trembling. "For last night." I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Back in my room, I pulled out a notebook I hadn't touched in years. The pages were yellowed. The handwriting inside younger, freer. Lyrics. Questions I'd once been too afraid to ask out loud. I began to write again. Not songs for charts. Not words shaped to please. Just truth spilling onto paper. Messy, unpolished, alive. I wrote about fear. About control disguised as care. About how applause can be the loudest form of loneliness. Hours passed unnoticed. As evening fell, a message arrived from an old friend. Someone who had stepped away years ago when my life became too guarded to reach. "I saw you last night," it read. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen. Closed my eyes. Brave. I had never felt brave on stage, no matter how big the crowd. Courage wasn't hitting impossible notes. Courage was standing still when everything you'd built demanded you move back into line. That night I declined every interview request. I didn't issue statements. I didn't explain myself. For once, I let the silence work for me. Lying in bed, the city glowing outside the window, I understood something clearly for the first time. This wasn't the end of my career. It was the end of a version of me that had survived by shrinking. Tomorrow, the world would decide what to do with the truth I'd given it. Twist it. Reject it. Exploit it. But it was no longer mine to manage. I had said it. I had owned it. And no matter what came next, I would never go back to singing around the truth just to keep the lights on. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came in waves, some loud, some quiet, some so subtle they almost felt imagined. In the days that followed, headlines shifted tone hourly. One moment I was unraveling. The next, unexpectedly courageous. The world couldn't decide whether to punish me or praise me for telling the truth. So it did both. I stayed away from the noise as much as I could. I turned off the television. I stopped scrolling. I let messages sit unanswered. Not out of fear, but because for the first time in my life, I didn't want my understanding of myself filtered through anyone else's reaction. What surprised me most was the quiet. No rehearsals. No fittings. No schedules pinned to the wall. Without the machinery of performance, time felt strange, almost too wide. I filled it slowly. Walks, writing, sitting still. Things I had once considered dangerous because they left space for thoughts I'd been trained to outrun. One afternoon, I visited an empty theater. No audience. No lights. Just rows of seats facing a silent stage. I stood at the edge where I'd once learned how to disappear behind perfection. I remembered the nights I sang through pain, through fear, through smiles that didn't belong to me. And for the first time I didn't feel angry at that version of myself. She had done what she needed to survive. But she was tired. A week after that night I agreed to one interview. Just one. No audience, no applause. Only a chair, a camera, and a woman who promised not to interrupt. When she asked why I spoke up then I paused. Because silence stopped protecting me, I said. And I realized it never really did. The clip spread faster than anything I'd released in years. Not because it was shocking but because it was quiet, measured, honest. No performance left to critique. Letters began arriving. Real ones. Handwritten. From people who had never seen themselves reflected in fame, but saw themselves in fear. Mothers. Artists. Teenagers. Men who had never told anyone they were struggling. They weren't thanking a singer. They were thanking a witness. And that changed everything. Not long after I was offered opportunities, fewer yes but different. Projects that didn't ask me to soften my edges or hide my story. Rooms where I wasn't managed, just heard. I said no to most of them. Not because I didn't care anymore, but because I finally did. One evening, alone at home, I played the piano without thinking about keys or expectations. My voice came out softer, lower, less polished, and more mine than it had ever been. There was no crowd to impress, no legacy to defend, just breath and sound and truth. That was when I understood the real cost of honesty. You don't lose everything. You lose what never belonged to you in the first place. The fear didn't vanish. Never does. But it shrank. It no longer sat in the center of every decision. It became just another voice. Not the loudest one. The world moved on as it always does. New scandals. New icons. New stories. But something remained. A quiet shift, like a door left open behind me. And I knew others would walk through it. I wasn't naive enough to believe truth saves everyone. Doesn't. But it changes the rules of the game. It removes the illusion that survival requires silence. That night, the night I stopped performing and started telling the truth, wasn't about exposure. It was about permission. Permission to exist without apology. Permission to be complex. Permission to be unfinished. If my voice had once filled arenas, this new voice filled something far more fragile and powerful. Space for honesty. And that, I realized, was the most enduring thing I could ever leave behind.